Thanks, Al. Well, firstly, thanks to Al for putting this on. When I jokingly said it's a feast for people analytics aficionados, it really is. 15 hours today, 15 hours tomorrow. And I know Al's already probably previewed some of the speakers that he's lined up over the next 2 days, some of the leading thinkers in our space. So I'm honored to be able to kick things off. And been involved with Al and PAFOW now for a few years. And I was thinking back over the weekend that doesn't seem that long ago, although it's a lifetime in many respects, that I was in San Francisco for an in-person PAFOW event at the end of January. We were just starting to hear about this virus that had hit Wuhan in China, but none of us could have predicted what would unfurl throughout this year. And first thought goes out to me, really, to anyone that's listening or watching that's been personally affected by this. I'm just going to spend a few minutes now, and then Al's going to join in afterwards to take a few minutes to look at where the space is now and where it's headed. And obviously, it's been a big impact on this year. So I'm actually going to share some insights from some research that we've done at Insight222 around people analytics operating models. But interestingly, this is research that's been conducted since the pandemic started. The report itself is not going to be out until the end of October, early November. But if you go to that landing page that you'll see at the bottom there, or if you just scan that QR code there, you'll be able to register to receive the report. I'm just going to give a sneak preview today of a few of the interesting things that are coming out of that. But first of all, let's go back to the start of this year. Again, I mentioned the PAFOW conference in San Francisco, which really, for me, kind of kicked the year off in many respects. And I think I stood up on stage at the start. Al asked me to do something similar to what I'm doing today, really. And I used this slide, really, to kind of frame the conversation. This was research that LinkedIn had just published back in January on their annual global talent trends. And again, always a good read. And these were the 4 trends that HR professionals themselves had said would be the most important to HR and recruiting, moving forward, the trends to watch, really. So firstly, obviously, you'll notice that people analytics is there. And alongside it, obviously, employee experience, which I know is going to be a big focus of what we talk about over the next 2 days. But a couple of observations, really, that firstly, to really do employee experience well, to really do internal recruiting well and start to personalize recommendations and career pathways for employees, what we're hearing around the talent marketplaces now, I think many are referring to, and to also to really understand our multi-generational workforce and particularly looking at the diversity and inclusion elements of that. You need data. So people analytics feeds the other 3 in many respects. And I think the second thing to bring out as almost prescient from LinkedIn, really, is these 4 trends have all been elevated by the crisis. And that all, as I said, they all require data. So before I dig into some of the highlights from the research, I just thought it'd be helpful to highlight a little bit about what we do at Insight222, because I get lots of questions about this during PAFOW events. So we've been in business for around 3 years. We set the company up because we're passionate about people analytics, and it's designed to support chief human resource officers, people analytics leaders and their teams get more value out of people analytics, provide more value to the business. And very much our approach is around delivering that business value, both for the business itself in terms of financial terms, but also for employees, and which really links well with the people data for good banner that really PAFOW operates on. So we work with around 70 global organizations, and we have a research-led approach. And then there's 3 elements to our service: the People Analytics Program, which is a bundle of learning, networking, and advisory services; our accelerators, consulting, if you like, which is focused around transformation and strategy; and My HR Future, which is an online knowledge academy for B2B and B2C users. I know my colleagues Stacey Smith and Dirk Peterson will be in the virtual exhibition hall. So if you want to visit the Insight222 booth and find out a little bit more, then you can. Right, back to the research. So going to look at 3 areas of the research. Firstly, around, is the function still growing despite the pandemic that we're still in the midst of? Where is the people analytics team delivering most value in the business? And how is the operating model for people analytics evolving? So first question, is people analytics growing as a function? So this is research that we've conducted with the 70 organizations that I talked about earlier. And yes, people analytics, despite being in the middle of a pandemic, is still growing. So 54% of the companies we surveyed said that they were going to be growing their people analytics teams in absolute terms, even with the pandemic. And relative to the rest of HR, more money is being invested in people analytics and technology and skills associated with people analytics than other parts of HR. Now, why is that? Well, you're going to see a lot of evidence of that over the next couple of days. And as we saw at the PAFOW event, virtual event at the end of April, people analytics as a function and as a discipline has really been elevated by the crisis. And I think we can draw parallels with the global financial crisis of 10 to 12 years ago. People analytics was certainly not as big as it is now, but it was in place in companies like Google, IBM, and Microsoft and others. And their teams were elevated by the work that they did during the global financial crisis. And we're seeing the same phenomenon this time with the greater number of people analytics teams that have been set up in the last 5 years. I consider myself very lucky. I'm fortunate to speak to somewhere between 20 and 30 people analytics leaders every week. And the consistent message I've had during the crisis is, number one, they've never been so busy. Number two, their work has never been elevated as high within the organization on a consistent basis. I've spoken to several people analytics leaders who say that they're speaking with their CEO on at least a weekly basis. And this is because the work they're doing. So this is the second sort of reveal from the research. We asked, we asked in the survey, what are the top 3 areas where people analytics is adding value in your organizations? And this is the top 6 that came back from those 70 organizations. And what we're really seeing is a shift from people analytics almost as an HR, a sub-function within HR, delivering value for HR to delivering value for the business and its workforce. And I think that's probably the big thing that you can pull out of this. And perhaps the crises of this year can provide the best evidence of this, whether it's work around business continuity, employee wellness, inclusivity and equity, tying employee and customer experience together, or understanding the impact of remote work on the future workplace and future workforce. People analytics teams are at the heart of that in leading companies. And all this is kind of leading towards a new operating model for people analytics in many organizations. The challenge facing people analytics for some time is, and we can now kind of validate in the research we're doing, is a one around scalability. And a new way of working for people analytics depends on productizing services and adopting a service-centric delivery model. So this is the type of model that we're starting to see. And don't worry that the research, when it comes out, will dig into this in a lot more depth. And I'll certainly cover at a high level each of those 3 teams around demand generation, solutions engine, and implementation. If we think about our experiences as consumers, these are based around similar productization models. They're reinforced with personalization, they're intuitive user interfaces, and they give us that highly personalized experience. And people analytics and HR is now on that same journey. It's time to shift to a model that's focused more on demand generation. I was having a conversation with an organization this morning, actually, exactly around that. And the person I was speaking to is leading their people analytics consulting function. He was regaling me a story how he'd been sitting down with the MD of this particular business unit within this organization, really looking at understanding and how they could link the kind of work of the people analytics team towards the business function. And this team, this demand generation team, they engage directly with business stakeholders, understand and make sense of the challenges that they're facing, translate this into business strategy, and then the hypotheses that can be tackled by the solutions engine. So the solutions engine is certainly supported by a government's reporting and enablement, advanced analytics teams, that they produce these solutions in collaboration with the organization's technology and data functions. That organization's technology and data function isn't necessarily going to sit somewhere in people analytics. So it's shown on the model there as a separate but closely aligned connector in this particular model. And then I think what is quite new to all but maybe the more advanced people analytics teams, this concept of productization. So this is the product delivery team, as it were. And they work to design and create products for business stakeholders and dedicate time to ensure that these are communicated well, that the change management behind them is put in place, and that these products are embedded within the organization. So they're taking classic user experience type models and applying these within HR. And we're seeing this really, and I think we're particularly seeing this in organizations around these things like talent marketplaces, personalized learning. I sat down for a podcast recently with Diane Gerson at IBM, and a lot of IBM's success with people analytics is actually scaling it and productizing and personalizing in areas such as learning and career management within IBM. As I said, some of the more advanced people analytics teams are already working this way. And then as I said, for a deeper dive, you'll have to check out the report when it's out, which I said will be in early November. So, and again, on this and more, please speak to my colleagues in the expo hall, or please feel free to get in touch with me and ask a question. Al, I'm going to stop sharing now so I can actually see you when you come back in, because it was a bit disconcerting before. I was speaking to my slide and you were talking behind it, so I couldn't see you. So Al, if you want to come back in, we can maybe have a conversation about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just launched a poll in Slido. Does your organization have an operating model for people analytics? So most are saying no, but thinking about it thus far. But provide your answer there, and I'll share what that is. So the question that I have, when we go back in the history of people analytics, it used to be one or two individuals kind of doing a research project, and then it became more evolved where, okay, we got to stage this data on an ongoing basis, and there are tools that are come into play. And of course, with the pandemic, this, and to your earlier point, there's been these crisis management teams that have been spun up, and they have either really taken to the insights that have been generated by people analytics teams, or the people analytics teams just did not have all that data wrangled already. And they certainly didn't have time to just go start from scratch. So as we fast forward, and I know it's to be determined, but I'd love your thoughts on what is the new model going to look like? Is it going to be the fact that people analytics teams are truly going to start facilitating talent strategy, whether that be recruiting strategy, remote work strategies, or do you see something else happened where another group, whether it be a data analytics group as a COE, takes the leadership role? I mean, what are you seeing within the Insight222 membership, and what do you hope to see?
Well, I think to your first point, I think those teams that have that stakeholder equity, or the ability to develop that stakeholder equity, are the ones that are really coming to the fore during the crisis. I think, we both know of organizations where that hasn't been the case. And if anything, the people analytics team has been more sidelined. But I think certainly in the organizations we work with, that's the exception rather than the norm. So I think what we've seen, and I know we've talked about it before, Al, is we've seen people analytics almost move from the edge of HR, as you said, with essentially doing research, to being a core part of people strategy. And I think in many respects, we're seeing a lot of the clients we work with at Insight222, they are part of, a lot of them actually, some of the leaders now have head of people strategy and analytics, for example, in their titles. Yeah. They're very much involved in that strategy. And clearly this element that's really been accelerated by the crisis around remote and hybrid working is a core part of that. It's workforce and workplace planning in many respects for the future. Yeah. So I'd like to think that people analytics teams will be at the heart of those conversations, that they'll be bringing data to those conversations to hope to make them less about opinions and more about, actually, this is what our workforce actually wants, because I think that's important. And this is what our customer needs. And it's kind of meeting in the middle there. And to your point, I think that means working very closely with data and analytics teams and other parts of the business, particularly those that, specialize around the customers, and bringing those things together.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying. Of course, we've been working together for a while now, so it's not surprising, but I just want to elevate a point that you shared, and that is people strategy and analytics have been getting closer and closer together. And I have, when I first started in this space, it was very much that an analyst spoke to someone who was responsible for strategy, who then spoke to a group within the enterprise that was in turn going to take that strategy forward. And so that chain got noisy, and it became, a lot of good value got lost. And now that chain is getting tighter. So to your point, many are responsible for both analytics and strategy. And if they're not, then they're very close to those people who are formulating a strategy. And in fact, again, given the crisis, they're in the same room on a frequent basis, sometimes weekly, if not more frequently, around workplace strategy, around inclusion, particularly with people working at home and they have all these other distractions. So given all this, let's say an organization is just thinking about it, because the fact is, even though, and we've seen research of this, maybe you have something off the top of your head, proportionate to all enterprises, all organizations out there, people analytics is still not very well adopted. And it's this, many cases, esoteric thing. So I don't want to ask the basic question of where do you start, but I do want to say, how do you educate yourself? If I'm a CHRO, head of talent, someone who goes, oh my gosh, I see all these great things happening. I see all these articles out there. How do I learn the best next step for me in my organization? I know you produce a lot of content with your podcast, but what are some of the tidbits? What are some of the points that you would say to how to educate yourself and maybe take that best first step?
Yeah, I think you definitely look for the outside in a little bit there. There are so many good resources around, obviously conferences like this, whether they're virtual or in person, but particularly this conference, because I think you have that nice mix of CHROs and people analytics leaders sharing their stories. Obviously, you've got to find out what's relevant for your own organization. So talk to key stakeholders in the business, find out about the, hopefully, if you're the CHRO anyway, but find out or dig deeper on what the big business challenges facing your organization are. And then start to think about what the people elements of that are, and actually help your business leaders actually understand what the people elements of those business challenges are, because they may not have always have thought of those. And that can give you, you can start to identify, okay, what are the 2 to 3 big things that we could do to actually really help move the business strategy forward. And that might be around delivering better experiences to the workforce, for example. And then, assuming those organizations have limited or no capability within HR itself, go and speak to your consumer analytics, marketing analytics team. If you identify a big business challenge, the likelihood is it's going to involve your customers as well, and then work with them maybe on it to start off with, kind of prove the value, bring that people data into that conversation as well, and see what you can find. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to, I think we can learn, HR functions can learn a lot from marketing functions on how they've used data. And I know we hear that in conferences all the time, but I appreciate some people might be hearing that for the first or maybe the second or third time.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we got a question come in from Robert Cruzel. Robert, really enjoy your work and your posts. So thanks for coming in today. David, how do you balance scale and context as we move towards a product mindset in people analytics? The two can often work in opposition. Your thoughts on that? Scale and context.
I mean, if you're going to invest time, effort, money, and resource in developing and scaling a product, for goodness sake, make sure it's really important for your organization. And, again, do a small pilot to start off with. Find a business leader who has a desperate need for it. So I'm just thinking, if you're personalizing learning for a 100,000 person organization, I mean, start small. Start with one business unit, work with the leader of that business unit, understand how it could work, create a prototype, iterate it, do it with the business rather than just developing it for them. So I think that's important. And I think the context is, the more conversations you have with business leaders, and HR business partners as well, because let's be honest, they're in the business every day, the more likely you are to get to the right challenges that you can direct the people analytics work on. And and now I know you've talked about this before, and I've talked about it before. Have a group of people that meet to prioritize what the work of the people analytics team. Don't just leave it up to the people analytics team to decide what projects they want to do. They might just pick the cool ones and not the ones that actually really add value to the business. So I think see people analytics as something that goes across not just HR, but goes across the organization, involve as many people as possible. And that helps you make sure that you're shaping the work and using your resource in the right context, I would say.
Yeah, I love that response. And because there's a lot of talk and it's almost cliche, oh, you need sponsorship. And I prefer the term involvement. So there's a sense of ownership that you have your fingerprints on it as an executive. So when you have those discussions, then okay, we're in this together. You're serving this internal customer who's asked for this. So as we start to wrap up, David, you and the Insight222 team have obviously created a lot of value for your clients insofar as you have the research, the co-creation, projects, and what lies ahead. I know the operating model research that you have going, but I'm really intrigued about what's going to come out from you all as an organization to, of course, amplify and make sure we can all learn from that. So, what do you all have in store?
Wow, where do I start? So let's talk about the near future. So I think the operating model research is as I said, will be coming out in November. We're also working on a co-creation project with clients at the moment around strategic workforce planning. It was already identified as one of the most important topics for clients at the start of the year. I think it's even more important and probably even more complex now, thanks to the crisis that we're in the midst of. So that will be coming out before the end of the year. There'll be a version of it, a lighter version that will put some stuff out in the public domain around that. And then moving forward, it's just, I think, as you said, Al, although people analytics is, one of the fastest growing areas of HR, as you highlighted, there's so many organizations where it's either still in its infancy or it's yet to really be created. So I think as we see people analytics become an integral part of HR, I think we'll see more things. We're seeing, you saw the 6 areas that I kind of highlighted where people analytics teams are getting most value. I mean, look at those things. I mean, it's lots of stuff around the business, and it's really important stuff for employees around culture, around employee experience, around inclusion and equity. This is a field that is, I think, and I'm very biased towards it, of course, but I think it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, as we've joked, we're not only drinking the Kool-Aid, we're making the Kool-Aid. So objectively, if we go back in time, it's been that way. I mean, it's been, in my case, nearly a 20-year journey, and it's been growing over that time, which makes me cringe when I say, "Oh, people analytics is just starting." No, it's not. It's been around for quite a while. It even predates me. But to your point, it is not only going to be an elevated discipline from a practitioner point of view, but in terms of being educated consumers of this insight. We all have a role to play, whether you be an HR business partner or just somebody who is working in the organization, because we're all generating data, of course. Yeah.
Exactly.
So as we wrap, and any closing comments, tidbits of advice?
Yeah, probably one thing. I think the big challenge, even in organizations that are having some success with people analytics, is that how do we create that data-driven culture? And it's not just in HR, but it is a lot within HR as well, HR business partners in particular. How do we do that? Because it's not easy. It's change management, and it's not a training course. It's a series of events that probably need to happen. And I think that certainly is one of the big challenges that I still see in the field, and probably is why the growth has been, why you've been, obviously you're 35 now, if you've been in it 20 years. So, but I do see that as that's been one of the challenges for a long time. I can see it starting to move now. You know, the amount of questions I get from HR professionals themselves around how can they equip themselves better to really take people analytics into their conversations in the business are just growing all the time. So we're in a healthy state as a field. There's still far more we can do. Hopefully, we won't be sitting here in 20 years now, you know, saying, "Oh, I remember 20 years ago when we."
No, and if I do, kick me in the shins and just don't let me do that. No, it's but yeah, I feel very blessed to be part of the community, and I know you do as well. And speaking of that, thank you for all you do. I mean, it's amazing how much you churn out with the digital HR newsletter and your podcast and so forth. So thank you so much for your friend being a personal friend as well as an awesome professional. So thanks for being with me today, and look forward to learning and sharing more with you as we go. And before too long, hopefully, probably be next year sometime, knock on wood, you know, I'll have to grab a beer again and, you know, share some time in 3D.
In 3D, yeah, it'd be nice. I mean, I think we all hope that at least one of the conferences, PAFOW conferences next year, is in person. You know, it'd be wonderful to see people again.
We'll work on it. All right, David. Thanks again. Be well.
You too.